GL පිරිස් අමතුමා විනාඩි 13ක පමණ කාලයක් තියෙන්නේ.
Mr. Speaker, it is a great privilege to deliver the winding up speech on the government within, as you said, just 14 minutes while you are occupying the chair. This is basically a debate in which the government is setting out its reasons for opposing an international investigation. Mr. Speaker, it is necessary always to bear in mind in relation to this supposed international inquiry what its true purpose is. Nobody must think that this is a fair, impartial inquiry which will look at the facts in a spirit of detachment and come to a just conclusion. It is nothing of the kind. I would like to ask, during the entire period of 30 years, when we had a ferocious onslaught on this country by a terrorist organization, how many resolutions were brought in the Human Rights Council with regard to that matter? Not one, Mr. Speaker. Throughout that period, when this country was subject to terrorism of an unmitigated form, there was not one resolution that was brought before the Human Rights Council. After the end of hostilities, when the country is moving forward, there have been as many as 3 resolutions in 3 consecutive years. That is the reality of the matter. The Commissioner for Human Rights made the astonishing statement that Sri Lanka had resorted to various courses of action under the guise of terrorism. Guise of terrorism. That is, terrorism was a pretense. There was no terrorism. She actually made that statement. The phrase she used was under the guise of terrorism. The first call for an international investigation was made within 1 week of the cessation of hostilities, and that call has been repeated at regular intervals. It is therefore impossible to expect a fair and just conclusion to be arrived at the conclusion of this investigation. There has been a great deal of distortion with regard to the joint statement issued by the government of Sri Lanka and the United Nations Secretary General in May 2009. The sentence that was grossly misinterpreted was the final statement in this joint communique. The sentence is as follows: the government will take measures to address those grievances. All it says is, if there are grievances, the government will take steps to address those grievances. And the phrase used here in the earlier sentence, in keeping with international human rights standards. So if there are grievances, they will be inquired into in keeping with international human rights standards. That does not mean at all that we acquiesce in an international inquiry. There will be an inquiry conducted locally in this country in accordance with domestic procedures in keeping with international standards. It does not mean in any manner whatsoever that we are agreeing to an international inquiry. So that is a gross misinterpretation of the joint statement. Then, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that these are the main reasons why we think that an international investigation is grossly unfair and we cannot accept it. There has been a total lack of balance in recognizing the legitimate and indeed obvious achievements of this country since 2009 with regard to the resettlement of internally displaced persons, the reintegration into society of ex-combatants, the demining process, the huge infrastructure that has been built up in the northern province, the holding of the Northern Provincial Council elections. There is very little acknowledgement of all these achievements, and whatever acknowledgement there has been grudging and belated. So when we consider the magnitude of the challenges that the country was faced with in 2009 and the brevity of the period we had to deal with those challenges, there has not been a balanced assessment of the progress made. There has been no uniformity of the standards applied. Very special standards have been applied to Sri Lanka. Standards which have not been applied to any other post-conflict situation in any part of the world. So it has been a highly selective treatment of our country. We also have the very strong objection that the resolutions on the basis of which this international investigation is to be conducted are unacceptably intrusive. Unacceptably intrusive. The resolutions purport to deal with such matters as the relationship between the central government and the Northern Provincial Council, the role of the governor, the role of the chief minister. These are all domestic political issues and have nothing to do with the legitimate mandate of the Human Rights Council. Technical assistance is something that a country should request. It is not possible to impose technical assistance on anybody. There cannot be compulsion. If a country spontaneously and freely requests technical assistance, it can be provided, but not against the will of the sovereign nation in question. It is also very clear that the impetus comes from the diaspora. That is perfectly clear. The best example of that is that a sitting cabinet minister in a country made a statement to a leading newspaper in that country saying that he was embarrassed by the behavior of his government in relation to some of these groups. The next thing that happened was the minister who made that statement was compelled to withdraw that statement. In another country, the leaders of that country wrote a letter to the diaspora groups expressing gratitude for the support which has been received from those groups at a referendum which was held in that country. In one paragraph, there's an effusive expression of gratitude to those groups, and in the next paragraph of the letter which we have in our possession, the writer of the letter says, of course, we are aware of your concerns about the situation in Sri Lanka, and you can rest assured that we are with you. So, when some foreign leaders speak of a spotlight to be flashed on Sri Lanka, it would be a good idea to turn the searchlight inwards and to examine some of the issues in those countries. Today, the reality of the situation is that this campaign is being carried on not for the benefit of people in this country, but in order to satisfy the ambitions of influential politicians abroad. Some of the countries which did not support the resolution in Geneva had a very pertinent point to make. What they said was that a solution has to be sought in this country. It cannot be found elsewhere. And any course of action that is adopted must have the objective of enlarging the scope for constructive dialogue in this country. Japan said that very clearly. India said that very clearly. In the case of India, they departed from a course of action which they had adopted during the last 2 years. And in explaining the change that they made with regard to their attitude, they specifically said, we want to enlarge the space that is available for a constructive dialogue. I would also like to make this point to this august assembly that out of the 39 countries which co-sponsored the resolution, 36 were from Europe and North America. 36 out of 39 countries that co-sponsored the resolution were from Europe and North America. Asia, the continent of Asia, has 13 members of the Human Rights Council, and only one of those countries voted in favor of the US resolution. The continent of Africa also has 13 members in the Human Rights Council, and of those 13 African countries, only 4 supported the Human Rights Council resolution. Australia and New Zealand declined to co-sponsor. They are not members of the Human Rights Council. They were asked to co-sponsor, but they declined to do so. So if that is the position, can we really say with any degree of sincerity that this represents world opinion? What is international opinion without China, without Russia, without Japan, without India, without all the Arab countries? Can this be genuinely regarded as international opinion? I would also like to say, Mr. Speaker, that when we talk of reconciliation, different cultures have different approaches to reconciliation. One of the most interesting discussions I had during the last 2 days was with the Foreign Minister of Chile. His Excellency Geraldo Munez, the Foreign Minister of Chile, who made a very pertinent comment in the course of my discussion with him. He said the effective path of reconciliation depends very much on the context, on the history and the traditions of the country, on the background against which the process of reconciliation moves forward. He was making these observations particularly in relation to his own country, and what we find totally unacceptable about the resolution is that it is an attempt to impose upon us the values and the culture of a different part of the world. It may serve them well, but our culture is different, our ideas of accountability and reconciliation are different. The retributive content of accountability and reconciliation is not the dominant idea in our culture, and these are differences that have to be taken into account in evolving for ourselves a course of action which will deliver on the ground the results which we desire. So these are the reasons, Mr. Speaker, why we believe that this is a matter which has to be dealt with above the level of partisan politics. Whatever issues there are in this country, we need to resolve within the shores of Sri Lanka. What is happening in different parts of the world today makes it amply clear that any attempt at external intervention without sensitivity to the structures of the society in question. There are many examples right now, as I speak here, all over the world. There are many situations which amply illustrate the reality that that kind of intervention does much more harm than good, and that is why we think that with one voice we should declare unequivocally that external intervention in this form is totally unacceptable and not at all in keeping with the dignity and the traditions